Episode 3 of Star Trek Picard has warped into our screens today, so let's jump into our review and breakdown. Hey everyone, my name is Captain Jack and welcome to Trek Central. Picard Episode 3, titled The End is the Beginning, has now aired on CBS All Access and CTV Sci-Fi Canada. International viewers can watch Episode 3 via Amazon Prime Video on February 7th in less than 24 hours. As a heads up, our video here will contain spoilers for Episode 3 of Star Trek Picard. Therefore, to avoid spoilers, we recommend turning away now. With that out of the way, let's go. This week we're changing up the format and starting with our review of the episode first, then followed by a breakdown of key events. Right off the bat, I have to compliment Episode 3's musical composure, more so the entire composure of the soundtrack for Star Trek Picard. Jeff Russo has done a fantastic job at scoring this series, and for me, Episode 3 really shows it. For those that have watched the episode, Picard saying engage as the last arena goes into warp features some very classical nods to Trek music, which any long-time Trekkie should recognise near instantly. Speaking of the music, Chapter 1 of the soundtrack releases tomorrow on February the 7th, however, as a pre-warning, I personally think some of the track titles contain a few spoilers of the series, so you've been warned. We'll update Trekkies via our social media for details on its release, so stay tuned. Seeing Jonathan Del Arco back on our screens once again was a delight. I'm really liking the new design of his character of Hugh, but also the mystery surrounding his involvement with the Borg Cube Reclamation project. As mentioned in our video about Hugh's return last Saturday, it does appear there is some sort of power struggle or inner conflict taking place at the reclamation site, though I expect us to see these details later on. Speaking of details, Starfleet being involved with their own evacuation fleet's destruction is surfacing. I'm not sure about anyone else, but personally I'm getting really strong connections to Star Trek The Undiscovered Country. That film saw elements of Starfleet / the Federation and the Klingon Empire conspire to stop the peace movements, going as far as to assassinate the Klingon High Chancellor and frame James T. Kirk and Dr. McCoy of the USS Enterprise. While some might see it as a bit of a cliché story, so far I'm really liking and looking forward to how this mystery plays out in the long run. Episode 2 did a very good job at world building for the series of Star Trek Picard, and I feel that Episode 3 has the momentum and pace that many viewers originally saw. This episode feels like the adventure is truly starting out. Picard has his crew, a mission, an objective, and a pristine new ship. Let's quickly talk about that ship. The Last Arena, piloted by the ever so mysterious ex-Starfleet First Officer Chris Rios, is an interesting design for Star Trek, but so far I like it. It still gives me Mass Effect vibes for some reason, but not so much anymore. Either way, I can't wait to see this starship in action and how it plays out in Picard's mission. Episode 4 looks to have the last arena in action, so I can't wait for more. Once I've had more time to process some other thoughts and rewatch this episode, I'll be mentioning them in our Trek Central live streams this Sunday at 9 PM GMT. Head over for a casual discussion on the latest episode of Star Trek Picard every weekend. Okay, now I'm going to warp into our breakdown of this episode. As a reminder, if you're new around here, then make sure to subscribe to the channel for regular Star Trek content. We'll be discussing and theorising about Star Trek Picard in the run-up to next week's episode, so stay tuned for more. To start with, the attack on Mars gets shown again, but it's the underpin the next scene, which is the aftermath of the attack for the fate of both the evacuation fleet and also Picard's career. We're at Starfleet HQ in 2385, 14 years before the series takes place, with Picard meeting Raffi after a hearing on the evacuation fleet at Starfleet headquarters. Raffi refers to Picard as JL, which we first knew about in the IDW prequel Star Trek Picard Countdown comic. It's a nice little way to show the dynamic differs from that of Picard and his former first officer, William T. Riker. Jean-Luc and Raffi are talking about how to continue the evacuation and to counter any arguments put against them by Starfleet Command. The use of Starfleet Reserve officers, synthetic officers, and mothballed ships is their main sticking point. However, Picard informs Raffi that effective immediately, all synthetics are banned and any units are to be disassembled, as well as research halted on any form of synthetic life. Picard's last-ditch effort was to threaten Starfleet Command with his resignation if they do not accept continuing the evacuation plan. But they call his bluff and accept his resignation, ending his Starfleet career there and then. Now Raffi does get quite upset and angry towards Picard as she sees him basically giving up on not only the mission but her as well. She then gets called into the CNC's office, who probably proceeds to fire her or at least severely reprimand her. One interesting thing, which I forgot to write down here, but is the use of the Starfleet uniforms of the time. Personally, I really like these uniforms, and many of you have mentioned this as well. These are effectively being called the 2380s Starfleet uniforms. We know they've been in service since the year of 2385, and they must have gone out of service sometime before the new modern uniforms we see that Starfleet use in 2399. Either way, I really like these uniforms, and I prefer them to what we see the likes of Admiral Clancy and the other Starfleet officers wearing around 2399. I want to see more of these. Hopefully we get another flashback of Picard on, the bridge of the USS Verity. I just really want it. Moving forward of the Keys rocks, people were wondering why Picard took a shuttle instead of a transporter. Now the main reason we believe was to make sure the 86 vintage of Chateau Picard remained original and not replicated like it would be through a transporter. As we could tell from their cold meeting from last week's episode, Raffi is quite upset about Picard. He left her in a hovel near the famous Keys rocks, while Picard was able to go back to his grand vineyard in France. And in the last 14 years, he didn't even stop by to see how she was doing. Following this and the downfall of her career, she's turned to using substances to deal with her issues. I know that some people might have an issue with this being in Trek, but it is a very human issue on how to deal with the past, turning to drugs or alcohol to counter it. And I actually really like that we have characters in this series who are dealing with their past haunting them. It almost reflects certain values in the real-life world in a way. Raffi suggests that a high-ranking Starfleet official may have given support for a Romulan plot to destroy the evacuation fleet. This makes sense, but it seems like an easy answer. We know the Romulans have an operative that was ahead of Starfleet security, Commodore O, but we still don't know what their true motive is or how it connects just yet. Though, the third and final issue of the Picard Countdown comic that I did mention earlier did hint that the Tal Shiar were trying to destroy Jean-Luc's previous command ship, the USS Verity, in an attempt to halt or disrupt the evacuation efforts. Something bigger is going on here, and it will take us a little bit of time to figure it out as the episodes go on, I think. Either way, I can't wait to see this mystery unravel. We flash forward to the Borg cube. There is a great shot of the camera cutting through the Borg cube with very ominous music, which is amazing to see. We finally meet our executive director of the Borg Reclamation Project, Hugh, the former Borg drone. I absolutely adore his look, especially the Frankenstein-like scarring along his left eye. It kind of makes him a very unique looking individual and definitely shows how he's changed since his last meeting with the crew of the Enterprise over 20 years ago. Soji wants to talk to a former Borg drone about Romulan mythology, due to that drone being an expert, in the attempts to create a shared narrative framework to allow former Borg drones to relay and cope with their shared trauma. It's interesting to think about the idea of free will, and whether this is actually what Soji wants to do, or what she was programmed to do in the first place. Fast forward to the Daystrom Institute, Commodore O approaches Dr. Girardi, who's sitting outside eating lunch, and asks her about her recent visits to Admiral Picard, informing us that she's also the director of Starfleet Security. Considering what we know from Episode 2, Starfleet should find a new director pretty quickly. But if Section 31 can have an operative at the head of a Tal Shiar, it's only fair that the Tal Shiar can have one of their operatives at the head of Starfleet Security. How they got there, it's kind of a bit of a mystery so far. We're going to have to find that one out later on. There's lots of mysteries in Star Trek Picard, but I like it. Back to the Borg cube, we do get a few fast-paced moving scenes here. A weird thing I did notice in the cube is shots of panels moving between walls. It's kind of weird. I was thinking maybe the cube is trying to repair itself despite being salvaged. This could be a neat idea, but still looks kind of weird to see walls moving apart. I'm not entirely sure on it just yet. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. Another name for the former Borg drones are the Disordered. This seems of those who are, as the name suggests, disordered after regaining their humanity. This could be due to the shock of being assimilated and what might have happened to them. Hugh remarks on these being all the Romulans ever assimilated. This could mean all the Romulans assimilated by this cube, because we know that both the Federation and Romulan outposts were destroyed by a cube in the best of both worlds, and the lead up to that. So I guess any Romulan drones would have been destroyed when that cube was also destroyed, so it might technically be accurate. Now before Hugh enters the holding room for ex-Borg Romulans, he encounters troubles at the checkpoint with a Romulan officer. It's at this point we see elements of that power conflict I mentioned. Hugh reminds the officer that he has the authority as the executive director of a project, and therefore walks on by. Cutting forward, now in orbit of Earth, we get an amazing, beautiful shot of our hero ship, the La Serena. It looks amazing, and I'm sure we'll see a more detailed video looking at our brand new ship coming soon. Stay tuned for that. We get some lovely The Next Generation music while the ship gets shown off. Again, relating back to that beautiful music composure we spoke about at the start of this video. As Picard beams in, he's met by an emergency medical hologram that looks identical to Rios. I think this is an excellent touch, and it still goes to show that holograms weren't banned under the synthetic ban, as this was a common question after Episode 1 revelation. Stay calm, I'm pretty sure the Doctor should be okay. The hologram is actually dealing with Rios, who has a titanium shard just sticking out of him as he casually has a cigar. I already love Rios and just that calm energy he emits. He orders some alcohol and just pours it on his wound, not even allowing the EMH to use a dermal regenerator like any normal person would. As Picard goes to sit down on the bridge, he looks at the captain's chair, and there's a truly sense longing that he wants to return to that chair. It's a very sweet little moment, and I have a feeling it won't be too long before we see him sitting in that chair once again. Give it time, people, I think it will happen. We learn about Rios during the scene, and later he was the first officer of the cruiser USS Ibn Majad. I have no idea how to pronounce that, take it as you will. Which is a ship that Starfleet erased from the records. I'm sure we'll learn more about this starship and what happened to it as we go forward in this series. So far, it's adding to those ever-loving mysteries that keep building up this series. Those reveal that something did happen to the ship's captain, whose death traumatized Rios to the point he's still shocked about it many years later. Now the main issue I kinda had of this stems from the ENH, the Emergency Navigational Hologram. Just like the EMH on board the La Serena, this hologram is modelled after Rios, but this one has an Irish accent. A terrible Irish accent. It seems like the La Serena has multiple versions of Rios. Though I will say, having all these different types of emergency holograms is a very natural evolution of the EMH wanting to be the ECH, the Emergency Command hologram we saw in Star Trek Voyager. I guess we're now seeing ships with all emergency medical hologram staff? I don't know, kinda confusing. The ENH lists all of Picard's great achievements. Chief contact with the Q Continuum, Arbiter of Succession for the Klingon Empire, Saviour of Earth from a Borg invasion, Captain of the Enterprise's D&E, as well as the fact he worked alongside the great Spock, a nice little nod to the character. Back on Chateau Picard, Jean-Luc is getting ready to depart and is found looking up at the stars, yearning for the adventure once again. During a small conversation with Laris, we learn that he never really felt at home on the Vineyard, which does really make sense when you think about the character of Picard, especially when watching the Next Generation episode Family. Snapping back to the Borg cube, Ramda is doing some kind of puzzle. This is the ex-Borg Soji wanted to meet. She places down a card called Shiponin, which is a false door. We learn that traditional Romulan houses also have a false front door, alluding to the fact that nearly everything of Romulans is all about secrecy apparently, kinda what Laris said in the last episode. While Soji is analysing Ramda, she notes that ex-Borg can use mythology to form their own series of events, which is more like the daily news. You really have to pay attention to the detail in this scene as it moves at a good pace. Blink and you might miss a detail. Now Ramda suddenly reveals that she knows Soji from tomorrow. Whether tomorrow is a place or she does mean the future is unclear as of yet. Soji steps up the interview, almost turning it into an interrogation, with the fact that Ramda was on the last ship assimilated by the Borg cube they are inside. This kinda does shock Hugh in a way, and the reason why will be revealed later. Ramda asks, which sister are you? The one who dies or the one who lives, as the situation gets very tense. This gives me very much Ashen vibes, twins from Hindu mythology. As twins, they represent a cosmic duality of ideas such as light and dark, healing and destruction. This could have an equal in Romulan mythology as well, a twin of death and a twin of life. This builds on even more, as Ramda calls Soji Seb Shinab, the Destroyer. It's also revealed in the next scene that the secret Romulan agents, the Zat Vash, refer to Soji and her sister of Daj as the Destroyer as well. We're getting more connections to the vibe of synthetics being the Destroyer. Maybe it's something to do with Mars, I'm not sure quite yet, but there's definitely more to the story than it seems so far. Again, adding to that mystery we would really need to figure out. Finally, Jaban appears back at the Vineyard with some food for Picard on his journey. This does not really go to plan, as Romulan Zat Vash agents infiltrate the house in an apparent attempt to stop Jean-Luc from leaving, most likely with his death. A fight ensues with Laris and Jaban reaching the hidden weapons they've stored conveniently around the house. I mean, they both are ex-Telstar agents, so they know what to do in these circumstances. We see Laris and Jaban really acting as protectors of Jean-Luc here. Dr. Jurati appears to kill a Romulan, not knowing that Romulan disruptors have a stun setting, which does shock her quite a bit. I really love her sort of, entire personality here. Jaban is about to use force to interrogate the agents, to which Laris reminds him that that's not their way anymore, alluding back to the fact they're ex-Telstar agents, as I mentioned. What's kind of funny is that Laris actually uses a gardening spray to wake one of the men up. I just like this detail, it's really funny. We do get a bit more swearing in this episode. I know not everyone's a big fan of it, but at least it's in Romulan this time. The Romulan operative calls Picard a Quinzephin. I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation. We don't do Romulan on this channel. If you know the pronunciation, let me know. As he gives no information, things do not really go anywhere, and he uses the same suicide pill which results in Jebahan almost being disintegrated. I do have to think that Jean-Luc should have remembered the Romulan acid from Daj's assassination, but then again, after a giant explosion, one's memory tends to be a bit fuzzy, I'd imagine. Following the interaction of the ex-Borg, Soji phones her mum asking if Daj is okay, to which the mother says that she's fine. Somehow the phone call manages to put Soji into some form of sleep. Mark my words, I am confident the mother of Daj and Soji is nothing more than an advanced computer program designed to control or calm them in some way if possible. A program of a mother is a perfect symbol for the entity of this idea. We almost see this in episode 1 when Daj gets very worked up over almost just being killed, and the mother calms her down and tells her to seek out Picard. I have a feeling someone might be controlling this program or it's used as a symbol to represent that, but we'll have to find out later on. Again, the mystery of Soji gets even bigger when she reveals to Narek about how she knows of information on Romulan starships, of which she mentioned to Ramda, when she didn't know any of this before, theorizing that she must have read it in unclassified reports. I'd say that Narek does not believe this, which is evident as he knows what Soji actually is. Moving forward with more of his own cunning manipulation tactics, he tells Soji that he loves her. It's also revealed that Nerissa is now back on board the Borg Cube, apparently operating in the lower levels where it's dark and kind of eerie. Not sure what she's up to yet, or how she fits into the hierarchy of the Borg Cube, but we're going to have to see later on. Finally, Jean-Luc Picard has his crew assembled, with Rios hailing him via his Starfleet comm badge to let him know that it's time to leave as things are getting busy. Jurati also joins him on his adventure, revealing that Commodore O is also aware of their plan. Beaming on board the La Serena, it's also revealed that Raffi is joining Jean-Luc on his mission to find Bruce Maddox, who she's conveniently located at a place called Free Cloud. I'm not sure exactly what this place is, though from Raffi's investigations earlier, it seemed to have a connection to some form of gambling, I guess. More investigation and breakdown is needed of this specific location, I feel, and we'll probably theorise and speculate on what it is sometime next week. The episode ends with the crew assembled and Jean-Luc Picard saying his famous line of "Engage," as the Next Generation music swells, with the La Serena going to warp. Picard is back in action once again. Alright everyone, that does wrap up Trek Central's review and breakdown of Star Trek Picard Episode 3. Tomorrow on Friday the 7th, we'll be breaking down even further to analyse those details you might have missed, because believe me, there are plenty in this episode alone. If you're looking for a more casual discussion of Star Trek Picard, then feel free to tune in to our Trek Central Live on Sunday at 9pm GMT, discussing all things Picard Episode 3 and what's to come later this season. Let me know what you thought of this episode down below in the comment section. I'm always interested in your opinions on the latest Star Trek episodes. If you like this video and want to keep up to date with all things Star Trek news, lore and more, then make sure to subscribe to Trek Central here on YouTube. You can also follow us on social media for daily updates, as well as visit our website for weekly articles. We're also now rolling out our community Discord server, so come join the party ahead of a new series. For now, I've been Captain Jack, thanks for watching, and I'll of course see you very soon.